Big tech companies are multi-trillion-dollar companies with annual revenue in the billions. Billions. The average human brain cannot comprehend how much more significant billion is than million. To put it into perspective, 1 million seconds is about 11 days, while 1 billion seconds is 31 years. One can argue that no one, regardless of who it is or what you do, could ever need that amount of money. So, these major companies that are leaving an indescribable carbon footprint should certainly use that excess to put back into the environment what they are destroying in order to run said companies. Not only should they, but at this point, they absolutely must. Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Casey and I am an online sophomore at Middle Georgia State University. I'm currently in a class called Perspectives on Computing and Society. For this class, I was required to come up with a final presentation about something meaningful we covered during our time in the class. For me, nothing was more impactful than when we covered the topic of big tech for good. This section included highlighting the ways in which big tech companies contributed to positive societal change. And while there were many companies that did, and in many different ways, which I will discuss later, in my opinion, there's just not enough being done. What qualifies me to talk about this? Not a whole lot, other than a real interest in technology, big tech, and its impacts, and a passion for our planet and doing what we can to minimize our carbon footprint. I am, however, currently doing quite well in my studies here at MGA, if I may say so myself, and I do have plenty of professional and personal knowledge on the subject. So maybe that makes me at least a little bit worth listening to. In 2023, according to TechRadar.com, Google and Microsoft consumed more energy than the countries of Iceland, Ghana, the Dominican Republic, and Tunisia. The fact that a company, even as one as big as either Google or Microsoft, can consume more energy than several well-known countries is staggering. This is just one example I'm going to give you about big tech's literal earth-shattering capabilities. So what exactly is big tech? In simple terms, big tech refers to the largest technology companies in the world. There are a few companies that fall under big tech that essentially have a monopoly on search engines, social media platforms, operating systems, etc., and they operate internationally, so they dominate the global market share. There are several big names that you likely know that are considered big tech, like the ones previously mentioned here already: Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, and Google. But now you're probably wondering, well, what exactly are these companies doing that's so bad for the environment? Well, there are several things that they're doing, and you probably know some, but there are many issues that go much deeper than most people realize. The main concerns, which most of you listening to this probably do already know, are energy and water consumption. Big tech companies consume exorbitant amounts of water and energy, which in turn leads to them producing excessive amounts of carbon emissions. In fact, in 2021, big tech produced between 2 and 3% of the world's carbon emissions, according to the UN. Now, when you hear 2 or 3%, you might think immediately that that seems like a relatively small number. But when you really think about it and compare that as a percentage to the entire rest of the planet, it's shocking. Again, to help put this in perspective, if the entire planet emits 41 billion tons of carbon emissions in 1 year, which according to the global carbon budget, it did in 2024, that's still 1 billion tons emitted on big tech's behalf. And if you remember my seconds conversion from earlier, then you know how much that truly is. To truly understand how harsh big tech can be on the environment, I want to give you some specific examples. Smartphones and other similar technologies are really not designed to be thrown away easily. In 2018, Business Insider reported that Apple and Samsung were fined $10 million after being found guilty of deliberately slowing down smartphone use in order to encourage tossing the phone to get an upgrade. This was, of course, for the benefit of their profit, but how many phones needlessly sat in landfills because of this? And this is considered a minor incident. Of course, there's much more waste than just that from big tech companies, as well as carbon emissions from their company's centers on levels that are inconceivable, and potentially hundreds of thousands of acres of land being demolished worldwide each year to make way for more centers. But then there's water. Big tech companies use incredible amounts of water to run cooling systems to keep their equipment from overheating. Data Center Dynamics reported that just 2 years ago, Google announced plans to build a data center in Arizona. It was shortly thereafter discovered that plans were negotiated with the city and that Google would be receiving a discount on their water, nearly half of what the residents were paying. Not only this, but the center would be consuming several million gallons of water in a single day, none of which would be recyclable. To get even more specific, let me tell you about data centers. Data centers are some of the most staggering examples of bad for the environment. They, of course, also use shocking amounts of water and energy that pose incredible risks to the climate, but there are other risks that they pose as well. And these, most recently, have come up largely within communities that are getting these big data centers built near them. Things right here in Georgia have gotten particularly worse lately, with a massive data center being built in Fayetteville recently and another being currently proposed in Tyrone, cities that are just 10 miles apart. Residents are concerned, and rightfully so, about the impacts that their water and energy usages will have on straining the local resources and infrastructure. But smaller and still more important effects are being passed down to them as well. For example, most of the quote-unquote tax breaks residents of data center towns receive are more effective for the data center than they are the resident themselves, as most of the financial burden gets shifted to the schools and communities. Additionally, there are few actual long-term high-paying jobs that residents get to utilize in PR debates. Overall, the negative impacts of AI data centers being built far outweigh the positive, at least environmentally, in the communities and even surrounding areas where they are being built. All of this to say, I believe these big tech companies, and all major companies really, should be legally required to do more for the planet. This quote here really just says it all. I mean, we have one home and we need to take care of it, especially those that have the exceptional means to do so. The obligation to the planet shouldn't have to be forced upon these companies, and not all of them are, which I will touch on momentarily, but for many, that is the way it is. But the moral question is, if they have the means to do so, which they certainly do, and they are the ones causing so much environmental damage, which they certainly are, then why not? Legally enforcing this law would not be exceptionally difficult either, as many corporations are already being required to disclose their emissions, such as those in California set by Governor Gavin Newsom, which PBS reported on in 2023. And others are being held accountable for their carbon footprint as well. All that would be required would be enacting basic new legislation that is similar to what is already in place. The companies that are doing this of their own accord absolutely deserve to be recognized and praised as well. Amazon, one major big tech company that everyone knows and I've talked about here, is doing their part in several ways. Again, as seen here, which is a flyer I made for a previous assignment that in turn led to this discussion. In 2020, Amazon became the largest corporate buyer of renewable energy and achieved 65% use of renewable energy across all of their operations, a 42% increase since 2019. That's just in 1 year. That is stated in their sustainability report, an annual report that they maintain, which is what my flyer here is primarily about. In it, they discuss everything from their investments in carbon-free energy, their scaling solutions and collaborations, to their progress, approach, and commitments. They also have their own Climate Pledge Fund, which is a $2 billion venture investment program supporting the advancement of sustainable technologies and services that will enable us to meet our 2040 net zero carbon emissions goal. Other big tech companies like Apple, Meta, and Microsoft are all doing their part too, with Apple going carbon neutral in 2020, Meta now having all their operations powered by renewable energies, and Microsoft being the most ambitious with a goal of being carbon negative by 2030, and removing all of their emissions since their founding in 1975 from the environment, according to a great article written by Green Earth. If this presentation today inspired you in any way, please do something about it. Share it, ask me more questions, tell someone about it, anything. The more we get the word out about how important it is for big tech to be required to make the necessary changes, the more people will take action, and the better off our planet, our animals, and our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will be. Thank you.